Okay, everyone, we are getting set here. This is the first stream, so stick with me as I figure all of this fun stuff out, which is probably going to be a ride. All right, so this is me over here. To my right for me, but I don't know, maybe depending on how you're watching it, my left is Gray. I'm sure I'll learn where people show up, later on. How's it going? That was to you, Gray.
I thought you were talking about the audience, and I am doing pretty good tonight.
I'll figure this out. I'll figure this out one of these days. This is episode one. Like I said, as the stream was starting up, we are just learning how this all works. This is my first time really attempting a live stream with OBS and first time trying a live stream on Twitch. But yeah, I'm getting some messages from friends saying they are getting in, so that's great to hear. All right, so tonight's episode, the idea I came up with early on was that a lot of people are going to see this, especially on YouTube later and listen to the podcast and have no clue who I am. And, it's probably a better state for the world, I would think. There's more important things out there. But here we are with the show anyways. So I was talking to Gray about an event that he was helping organize downtown at that time for Universal Basic Income. And it came up that I wanted someone who didn't know a lot of this stuff, like just because we hadn't had these conversations before, to interview me. So it would be kind of a first time learning all of this for everyone, and it would make for better questions because most of my friends know all of these stories already. So they're gonna, I don't know, their questions are gonna be a little different when they know everything. They're gonna lead me, and I don't like being led in questioning in interviews. So so I think we're gonna start it off here and start talking about why we're here.
Sure. And so I think that the first question as a nobody in the Gregg Housh story is, what was your role? Like, how did you get involved in Anonymous? Because Anonymous was, super popular, I would say 2009, 2010, or super infamous.
Right.
And that's kind of your big claim to fame.
That is how I ended up on the news. Yeah. So early on, I really didn't have any parenting of any kind that really mattered. My dad was a bank robbing, scam running criminal, and made it clear to me that I should follow in his footsteps. So, with that going on, it just I never really learned not to do the things that you shouldn't do. Right from wrong wasn't really a thing that came into play when I was thinking of things. So, of course, knowing that, I end up on a path that just leads me straight to prison. By all of my criminal fun in the 90s and everything else, I was caught. I ended up going actually to federal prison. I was in solitary. And,
You're saying in the 90s is when you started getting involved in the prison system. How old were you then?
I was doing all of my crimes in the 90s. I was caught by 99, 2000, in that range. I was being watched, and then I got raided, and by the mid 2000s, I was being sentenced to go into prison, which was not too fun.
We're talking about crimes. What do you mean specifically here?
A lot of stuff on the internet. A lot of we're talking about software piracy. We're talking about dealing with foreign nations to get, my biggest thing that a lot of people that I was actually working in the software piracy stuff with that they didn't know because, you weren't supposed to be doing this was I was profiting off of some of it. By taking, our work, which was getting a piece of software before it was released. Like, we had Windows 95 in, December 93, right? And sure, it was an early build, and it said Chicago in the background, which was its code name, but we were having a lot of fun with it. And I was taking those things and finding the first stable versions and sending them over to friends in China who were literally just printing copies and selling them on the street and selling them in black markets and whatnot. And I was taking my cuts. And so depending on, which agency was looking for me at any one time. It was different crimes I was getting looked for.
So a lot of your
it was all computer
crime was you paying the bills, right? Like you stealing the software from big companies,
yeah,
and then selling it out. And I'm assuming, based on the parenting you're talking about, you were either on the streets or out of the house, and like this is how you're surviving.
Yeah, by then, so I was out early a couple times. I first was on the street at age 7, and then got back with my parents, with my mom anyways. And then I was back again at 13, and so a couple early times. By the time I was really just outright in a house that I was paying all the bills in, and it wasn't anything related to foster or any of that type of stuff, because I never made it into any of those systems. I was about 17 and living in another state than my mom, and I should say I was in that state by the time I was 13, but when I was actually like in my own place paying my bills, I was 17. But by 13, I had reconnected with my father, who had been gone for probably, at that point, 6 years since the last time I had seen him. And
he was in prison, or gone because he had left it?
Gone because he was still doing crime and on the run from the feds and everyone else, and he didn't want to get caught. Once the things that he thought were the worst over his head were kind of gone, be it statutes of limitations or cases getting cold cased, or I have no idea what he was thinking about. At that point, I was 13 when he showed back up. Yeah. He ended up finding me, and we got a little townhouse together and started working on some projects. And quickly, I got my first powerful computer, and it turned out they came very natural to me. I didn't have to fight with these things. Like anything else in my life, like if you give me a hammer, like a guy 2 blocks away is somehow going to get hit with it, and I'm not even going to throw the thing. I have no idea how to use tools. But like if you have me sitting there in front of a computer, just it's all easy. Like I don't have to work hard at this stuff. So and that was early.
Incredible to me because and we've talked about this a little offline. When did you stop going to school? When did you stop going to school, and when did you learn about computers and how to pick them up?
My last grade that I finished the entire grade in school was 6th. I attempted to do some 7th grade and ended up getting expelled. And then I ended up doing my GED out after passing a 9th grade equivalency. The way Texas worked it at that point, you had to do all these crazy steps. So while the last full year I actually finished was 6th grade, my record will show 9th grade, but I really wish I had gone through 8th and 9th, and because my writing shows just how little of the higher levels of essay writing and whatnot I missed out on by not going through those earlier. In early high school, they start to get you writing essays, and by the end, you're writing really big things, and I got none of that. So my writing is horrendous. If my wife wasn't an amazing writer, I would everything I put out would look like a 3rd grader wrote it.
Gotcha. Luckily, we're in the age of communication where you can just talk at a computer and people will listen. You don't have to dive as hard back onto that.
Right. And I want to shout out as I'm getting my feel for this. Thanks to Dev Null here, and thanks to Kaskuna for subs and follows and all the fun stuff going on.
Awesome. So, in your timeline, I think we had stopped talking. You're in middle school, high school. You had dropped out of school. You were learning about computers. You got your first nice computer, and it comes naturally. You just immediately immerse yourself in technology. It's no problem.
Yeah.
So in these early years, as you're starting to live by yourself and pick up computer stuff, what are the first things you're doing? Because I'm assuming the first thing you did, wasn't software piracy.
Right.
But that was kind of the early stages of.
Well, those early stages back then, in the late 80s, early 90s, it was really hard to actually get into those scenes. So now you can go up to the Pirate Bay and download whatever you want, right? I mean, now it's all who cares? But back then, even getting the knowledge of where to connect up to a system that might have this stuff, you might know a group of locals for months before you find out that they even know where it is, let alone before they're willing to give it to you. So it was the late 90s before piracy really became so easy to access. Back then, it took you 2 years to get onto the best piracy BBS in the area that you were living, stuff, right? So I was working at that point on finding my local contacts, learning about 2600 and going to their meetings and meeting people and kind of ingraining myself with that because on the same vein, right now when you want to hack, you can go take some courses that all the videos are up on YouTube, or there's some really good courses out there that are full like CTF, like red team, blue team kind of hacking courses for offensive stuff that are free online. Back then, if you wanted to learn how to hack, you were getting onto message boards that had text files that might explain pieces. You were studying programming, and then you were begging actual hackers to talk to you. And after 2 years, they might. So like, it was a lot of work of just getting myself into the communities early, and then finding out that I was actually pretty good at what I was doing and moving up very fast once I was in them.
So why were you, and I know you talk a little bit about your dad and his background in crime, but like, why were you so driven to, like, why do you think you were so driven to this, right? Like, this sounds like a heavy startup cost.
It was, but it's just...
And yet you persisted.
yeah, well, I mean, almost exactly. Like, that's it. Like, we know where that saying's from. Like, that's like, it's like, no matter how hard it got, it felt right. Like, I don't know if some dude who's like, roofing houses is just sitting up there all day in the sun loving it and just knows that, like, this is where I'm supposed to be. But, like, when I was starting my first even, like, war dialing, like, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie War Games, when he's got the thing auto-dialing phone numbers and looking for computers to talk to. Like, the first time I ran the software Tone Loc to do that, like, it was exhilarating. I was like, I'm gonna get in these things. I'm not supposed to be here, And that feeling, like, it's, like... sports, when you're playing sports, and I played a little as a kid, but, without kind of family support, it was really hard. So, like, you get the win, right? In hacking, and even in piracy, you get the win. Like, when I got my hands on that first copy of Windows 95 in early beta, like, long before anyone outside of the company was even supposed to know it existed, like, you're sitting there with that install file now, and you're like, yeah, Bill, suck it. Like, that's what's going through your head, like... So there was energy to it. It felt like you were winning.
I mean, it sounds like it's your calling based on a number of factors. This is your role in the human race.
Yeah.
And you've embraced it fully. So you're like doing a lot of hacking. You're playing around. You're like stealing from Windows, making some money. How did you get immersed in like the 4chan universe?
So that comes after prison, right?
Organism. Yeah.
So I get out of prison and, there's a bunch of stuff, right? So all the things that I was doing was so highly illegal that I shouldn't go back to them. Because one, I'm exposing anyone that I connect with then to any surveillance I might be under, and all that other fun stuff. So I was trying hard to, like, navigate what could I do to have fun. And I'm bored and I'm on a computer.
Let's pause real quick. Because I guess we're skipping over the prison portion, right? And so, like,
sure.
Did you get arrested for software piracy?
Well, I had 19 different charges. By the end, they couldn't prove barely anything. So they were able to prove the software piracy. And because that was really easy to prove at that point. They had a lot of evidence because I had done a lot of it. So we made an agreement, a plea deal, where all the other stuff goes away, which we had basically proven in pretrial stuff that I could beat. And I'll plead guilty for this and go to prison. You get your win. You get your little gold star, Mr. Agent. You got him. As long as it's the weakest of all the charges. And at that point, we were over 6 years into my prosecution, and they were getting really upset with this shit, and they just wanted me to go to prison. So they took it. I mean, it was like, yes, just go to jail. And I ended up going to federal prison in Massachusetts, which is actually how I ended up in Boston. I was living in Chicago when I got busted, and they basically kept me from doing any of the things that I had been doing to make money. And I had a small little consulting gig where I was doing some programming, but it wasn't paying what now were the bills. And they were a little different at that point. And so I went looking for work. And in Chicago, a couple big companies had just gone out of business. So tons of people with my skill set were sitting on the street looking for jobs. And they all had high school degrees and diplomas. And they were light years ahead of me in the interview process. And they weren't currently awaiting prosecution by, the federal government. They didn't have any paperwork that said Gregg Housh versus the United States of America versus Gregg Housh. Like that paperwork is kind of scary, at that point. And So I ended up just going to them and saying, I need to move to another city where there's more tech jobs. And after I looked around the country at where the jobs were available, they were really clear that the only one of the cities that had jobs available that I was allowed to move to was Boston, because the district they were going to charge me in and put me in front of a judge in was in New Hampshire, and they really wanted me to go to prison at Devon's, which was here in Massachusetts. So I was like, well, I guess I'm moving to Boston. That's actually how I got out here. It was the only place I was allowed to move.
Okay.
Building a resume,
So,
damn straight.
and just for reference, where in the timeline are you here? Are you like your early 20s?
Yeah, by then I just turned 44 on the 17th, so at this point I'm getting up there in age. But I don't know. I still spend half of my day watching Minecraft on YouTube. I don't think I'm ever gonna be older than like 17 in my head. But that's just kind of how I am. It's probably why I fit so well on 4chan back in the mid 2000s there. But yeah, I was 27 I think when I went in. So somewhere right around there. Yeah.
Okay. And then how did you get involved with Anonymous? Because like you said before, initially it was just a group of internet trolls messing with people.
That was, it was boredom, right? I get out and I can't do any of the things that I used to do. None of my friends want to talk to me because of obvious reasons of their past. And there I am sitting at home with a job at a local computer repair company that sends you to small businesses. I don't want to say like well beneath my skill set, but like they were paying decent. The boss of the place was really cool to like keep me on during, like I got hired by them right before I went to prison, and then they kept me on during because they knew it was such a short sentence, and then so I came right back out to work. So like thank you those people. Shout out to a company that probably doesn't want to be named in this context, but shout out to them. So I end up, doing that work and being bored. I go home and what am I supposed to do? And I found 4chan, it was like late 06 was the first time I'd heard about them before I went in, but I didn't do much. I played around like on the Habbo raid and stupid stuff like that, but that was like 5 minutes and I wasn't really a user of this site. A friend of mine would like tell me, hey, come join us on this thing. And, what really happened was I'm sitting there bored one night. I hop on and I see them going after, just actual people. Like there's the Hal Turner raid. There's other raids on different image boards. It's entertaining. It's fun. It's a game. They're all yelling at each other. They're all being jerks, but like it's kind of an in club where most of the hate that you see being spewed is actually like when your roommate says something stupid and you call him a name, right? Like it's like, there's love in that kind of insult, right? And it felt like an environment where I could have some fun, have some new friends, and not be so damn bored. Honestly, literally, I fell into 4chan out of sheer boredom. And it was a few months of that before stuff started to get, way larger and way more real.
So what was the transition like from just messing around, meeting some people online, like doing, explicit activism, explicit organizing? Because I think the Church of Scientology expose was like the first big thing that you guys did, or was there something before that?
There were a few ops that like the Anons like to point at, like the Hal Turner raid, which ended up with a white supremacist bastard who had a radio show ending up in prison. So stuff like that was pretty fun. But on order of size, you're talking, 200 or so people were ever super active in that one. And and the real active, like we're making phone calls and actually getting this guy thrown in jail, was like 20 people, right? So you take that and then you hit January in 2008. There were a couple months of talk and playing around with Scientology as as Dev says, ordering pizzas and black faxing, which I don't know if you know what that is, but when you fax someone a full black page, it wastes their ink, things like that. Just all the stupid pranks that you're gonna expect out of 4chaners at the time.
The FBI knocks of
Yeah, yeah, and this is all going on a little IRC server with a few people, and it's not big yet, right? And this side channel starts up that is really just about 8 of us. I think the first day it was only like 5 people, and then it became about 8 people. And it was initially called Press, just Press, because we thought some of the stuff that was happening with Scientology might end up getting some press coverage. And someone in one of the other channels had joined, and this was a user who joined, told us something, and then left, and we didn't see again. So we still, for like 6 months, had no clue who that guy was, but he said the press are going to come talking, you should write a press release. So we started the press channel and went over there and did that thing. And by then we had to move IRC servers, which is just a chat server like Discord or anything else, but kind of the predecessor to those things. And because we were drawing enough attention that the people running those servers were sick of the users coming on and just causing them grief. And, anonymous, yay, right? And so we're on this other server, and it's named Party Van. And a lot of the old schoolers will remember Party Van IRC and the Party Van Wiki. And it was a lot of the stuff related to early Anonymous. And if you Google it all, you'll find all kinds of fun stuff about that early stuff. And some of it good, some of it really bad. But it was what it was, right? And
I just realized some people might not know what an IRC is.
Yeah, IRC is just like Discord. But like Discord or any of these other new chat systems, or even Slack is kind of built around the idea of IRC. Like imagine that IRC really was a black background with white text and a list of users in a channel, and there's nothing else. Like you don't have emotes, you can't attach files, there's no graphical. And then years later a graphical interface came up, and slowly it evolved, and then in the end everyone was like, yeah, but we're using a protocol from the 80s, and we ended up with things like Slack, with things like Discord, but built around the same ideas. So if you're used to any modern chat systems, just imagine only the chat and no bells and whistles, and that was IRC. So we're there, and we're in this press channel, and this little itty-bitty group of us, which none of us had known each other before about a week before this. And we didn't know each other in real life. We only knew each other from the IRC and from 4chan.
And like you being anonymous as a group.
Yeah, well, so Anonymous as a group had existed for a few years at that point, but it wasn't what it became that month. It was randomly users from different chans doing different things. But it was 10 people from 420 chan, or 20 people from 4chan, or sometimes 100 people if 4chan and 8chan, or what was it, 888 at some point, and 711 chan, and just all the other sites that got together, you'd end up with, a couple hundred people on a raid, like against Habbo Hotel, or something that was for entertainment. But then the 8 of us are working on this press release. We don't know how to make a press release. And here we've got this branding. We've got Anonymous as a brand, and it exists. And they've got all this iconography, and they've got some news reports from months ago where Fox News said they were hackers on steroids. But it still was only like in the end when on average you'd find 20 people on a chat server somewhere. And that was like it, right? And the press release starts reading more like a video script. And so as we're doing it, we're like, this reads more like someone's talking to you, less like a press release. And we had only learned what a press release was by going to like prweb.com. We were like finding like company press releases on the internet. And so by the end of the night, we had decided, no, we're gonna make a video. Well, what does an anonymous video look like? It's obviously a hidden face or no face or a mask, and we played around for a while on what this would look like, and we ended up coming up with one clear thing. It couldn't have any iconography, and it couldn't have any video or audio that was copyrighted or in any way attackable by like the DMCA or something, because the Church of Scientology use all of the legal tools they have available. So we had to find open, free, licensed video, which we did find. So the background video on this is stuff we found on the Internet Archive. And the song is a slowed down copy of a song that we had found on some Flash game website that also let you put up MP3s of your own music if you wanted. And this is like mid, 2008 January, so like we didn't have Spotify's or anything like that. And we started working on this video, and on January 21st, 2008, I know that date because it's like now in documentaries and crap. We uploaded this video to my YouTube channel, and it's the Church of Scientology is the username, but in the O is a 0, so because they own the other one, the right spelled one. And I think what we should do now is kind of show the video, right?
Sure, yeah, let's do it.
So let's see how that works out, as I have never done this before, but I guess I'm going to do this.
Hello, leaders of Scientology. We are anonymous. Over the years,
and that'll be good enough.
Your campaigns of misinformation.
Gonna ask chat, since this is the first time I've ever done this. Can you hear it?
All of these things have caught our eye. With the leakage of your latest propaganda video into mainstream circulation, the extent of your malign influence over those who have come to trust you as leaders has been made clear to us. Anonymous has therefore decided that your organization should be destroyed. For the good of your followers, for the good of mankind, and for our own enjoyment, we shall proceed to expel you from the internet and systematically dismantle the Church of Scientology in its present form. We recognize you as serious opponents, and do not expect our campaign to be completed in a short time frame. However, you will not prevail forever against the angry masses of the body politic. Your choice of methods, your hypocrisy, and the general artlessness of your organization have sounded its death knell. You have nowhere to hide, because we are everywhere. You will find no recourse in attack, because for each of us that falls, 10 more will take his place. We are cognizant of the many who may decry our methods as parallel to those of the Church of Scientology. Those who espouse the obvious truth that your organization will use the actions of Anonymous as an example of the persecution of which you have for so long warned your followers. This is acceptable to Anonymous. In fact, it is encouraged. We are your SPs. Over time, as we begin to merge our pulse with that of your church, the suppression of your followers will become increasingly difficult to maintain. Believers will become aware that salvation needn't come at the expense of their livelihood. They will become aware that the stress and the frustration that they feel is not due to us, but a source much closer to them. Yes, we are SPs, but the sum of suppression we could ever muster is eclipsed by that of your own RTC. Knowledge is free. We are anonymous. We are legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us.
And so that's the wonderful ominous video we made. And of course, you make a video like that as anonymous and whatnot. We were averaging somewhere around 200, 300 views on a video, unless like it was a real big raid. And we did not expect what was going to happen next, of course. So I go to sleep. Like we worked our asses off for a couple days to get that done. But again, it was a joke, right? Like we wanted to tell the whole world that the internet was coming for Scientology, and we wanted it to sound like it was the internet itself was coming for you. Like, be ready, right? And we didn't realize that that many people hated Scientology. So I get woken up the next morning by phone calls from people trying to get me out of bed to tell me that the video was being played on the news, and the chat server was offline because we had linked people to the chat server to come talk to us, and so many people were trying to get on that we had basically DDoSed ourselves. And we scramble for a couple hours getting the servers up and running. And to get the chat back up and going.
Do you want to explain what DDoS is for people who don't know?
Sure. It's a distributed denial of service. It's when a ton of other computers try and connect or do something to one computer on the internet so no one can access it. Everything on the internet has a certain amount of resources, and if everyone's using them up, it no longer responds. So many people were trying to get on the chat server that it could no longer respond, so nobody could get onto the chat server. And
simply plug the signal.
Mm-hmm. And so we're sitting there, and finally it's up. And people start filtering into the chat server. And, a few hours go by and there's it's a joke, but there are over 9,000 people on the server. And we ended up hitting close to 11,000 users at the max over the next 2 days. And so we're off in our little channel, which we renamed to Marble Cake. And a bunch of people kind of know that is the meme Marble Cake, also the game from way back when. That's what it's from. And we're trying to figure out what to do. None of us had ever organized any kind of big protests. None of us were activists. We were people playing around with Anonymous on 4chan. You didn't expect a global activist thing to come out of that, right? Nobody could have. Nobody saw that coming. Even though we say expect us on everything, nobody could have expected that.
Yeah.
So we are sitting there and just trying to figure it out. Unbeknownst to us, we had been infiltrated by an ex-Scientologist, a young woman who had been through hell in the cult. And she was doing a very good job of hiding who she was in order to help us understand how bad the cult was. So when we would be talking about what's next, let's, order some pizzas and go to sleep, she would be like, well, what if you did this? Because they're really bad like that. And we just thought she was finding stuff on the internet. Turns out she was actually an ex-Scientologist, right? And that's great. That actually worked out for us. But we ended up fighting for 3 days with all these people and trying to figure out what to do. And it came to us that, one, the chat servers kept having trouble because they all kept trying to join one channel. And you can't have 8, 9, 10,000 people talking to each other in one chat channel on one chat server. The server can't handle it. Their clients can't handle it. It's not a thing. So how do you separate people? Well, you have to get them to separate themselves. You're not going to go in one by one and move them to other channels, right? And you have to have the new people signing on to the server also self-separate into channels. So we decided that, New York, Boston, Dallas, LA, Paris, Hamburg, Berlin, these are big enough cities that if you were to say I'm from somewhere near there, that's still not doxing yourself. We, of course, now know better, but at the time, that was the best we had to come up with because we were so short on time. The server kept going down. We were trying to solve a problem. So we went into that main channel.
Real quick, you want to explain doxing?
Doxing is when you give, when someone decides that they want to get your information, phone number, address, full real name, whatever, and you're trying to, hide that, and then they put it online. So you make it a lot easier for people if you use colloquialisms. If you have TX at the end of your name, I bet you're from Texas. So, we were trying to not have people dox each other, but at the same time, we had to have them somehow segregate. And so we closed the main channel. You could still join it, but you couldn't talk anymore. And it was called moderated. And in moderated mode, it kept spamming every couple minutes a little message, a bot that was allowed to talk, and it was the only thing allowed to talk. And it was saying, join a channel named after the biggest city you live near. And slowly, over the span of a day, we ended up with channels for Boston, Dallas, New York, all these big cities. And by the end of the day, we're thinking to ourselves what to do with these people now. The server's stable. They're all talking. They're all talking to locals, making, I guess, friends. I don't know. Right? And learning how big their local communities are. There were 200 and something people in the New York one alone. And I saw a video on YouTube of this woman named Tori Christman. And she goes by Magoo online, but she self-doxed a long time ago, so she's awesome. And she's actually standing in Boston, which kind of, helped me find it. And she's standing outside of their building, and she's got one of those boom boxes, those big old, 70s dual tape deck, giant silver things, over her head. And she's 50-something. And she's just dancing. She is just... And she's screaming at the building, and no one's paying attention, but it's hilarious. And she's singing these songs about them being a cult and with a smile on though. It's hilarious. And so I copied it.
Outside the Scientology church?
Yeah, right outside of the building. So I copied a link to the video and put it into our Marble Cake planning channel. And I said, this is what the internet would look like if it went outside. And everyone's like, oh, yes, where do they have buildings? And within like an hour, we knew they had buildings in every major city in the world. It was like, they had buildings in small countries in Africa. Like, it was like, they were everywhere. Like, okay, do we have people? Well, actually, so one of the people in Marble Cake went channel by channel figuring out what we had and found out that we had 43 countries and 142 cities represented by these channels. We were like, what if we told them all, like, in a couple weekends or something, to go outside and yell at the building? And, that right there, like, that whole, like, 2-week period was where we end up with the second video telling them to go outside and do things. The third video saying, please don't throw a brick through their window. We want this to be fun. We don't need you getting arrested. That one was called Code of Conduct. And all those videos are still up on the same channel. The Message to Scientology video's on. And I'll link to it when this is on YouTube, so it'll be down below and all that stuff. See, I'm learning. You do that thing. I see that in a lot of videos. Right? And yeah, and it went from there. Like, suddenly the news is covering. Anderson Cooper is playing our videos on, like, AC360 and stuff, and news is hunting down people to talk to because Scientology gets to respond. So the news isn't really taking many anonymous sources at that point that aren't somehow famous. Like, you say you want to be anonymous to, MSNBC, and they're going to say no. But, a Joint Chief of Staff says, I've got an anonymous tip for you. They're like, yeah, we'll print that anonymously. That's the world we're still kind of in, but they're allowing a little more of it these days with all the whistleblowers and whatnot. But back then, you were not getting an anonymous quote in some big paper. So they'd say, well, Anonymous did this, and Church of Scientology has responded with this, and we have no comment from Anonymous. Like, that doesn't help. And Scientology spent a lot of money. In court, we found one of the numbers was $17.5 million, hunting a bunch of us down. Me specifically, because they were looking for whoever uploaded that damn video. They wanted that person first. But it was a group. But, being that I was at that point in control of the channel and everything, they found me. And they made a DVD called Anonymous Hate Crimes. And it was great. It was like, it looked like a 90s hacker video game. Like, if you've ever played any of those 90s hacker video games, like all the like cheesy graphics and I loved the video. They sent me a copy, so I actually it was the best, right? And so now my name's out there. I'm doxxed. Within an hour, I have 5,000 emails from news organizations. There's someone from the Daily Mail, like, on a plane on his way to, like, come to my doorstep. And I didn't know this until the next morning when I wake up to my wife telling me that there's a guy on our doorstep.
So how did they find you?
Well, so a lot of the early pieces I'm not quite sure of, but what we do understand is that someone at YouTube actually gave them IP addresses related to the account. And then they ended up tracking back basically to another system, and I was using like 10 different systems, so I don't quite know which one, but on one of them, they came at us and, or they came at them, and they ended up finding it's someone in Boston. And then they went looking at Boston, and it's hard to herd cats, as you might know as an organizer on this side of things, and as your Twitter handle, states you very well know. So there were a few of us that had to figure out, how do you protest in Boston? Are we all going to get arrested? Because their building is next to a bunch of residences, kids live in these houses. So I had to start figuring that shit out, and I ended up figuring out that the only way for us to do this and not all get in like serious trouble was that we had to have specific permits for what we were going to do, the sound we were going to be making, the levels up to like the decibel limits and stuff. And
yeah,
I took the hit of getting the permits. And
was on all the government paperwork as you're doing
right, which they can't just go grab, but they can file police reports against these people, and then they can watch the protest and see who's walking around and kind of organizing, and that was me. And by the end of it, they put the name and the channel who's controlling the Boston channel on the chat system, and Boston, and he's kind of running the show on the ground, and this name's on. And boom, they're like, that has to be our guy. So they start filing false police reports against me. Anything they can do to try and, mess with me, right? All their tactics. And that made me public. There I was. The world knew who I was. It was crazy.
Yeah. Wow. So at this point, you kind of been with Anonymous. You said this was summer of '08.
Yeah, by the time I was outed, it was late into '08. We had started the video we just saw, the Message to Scientology video, was January 21st, so that was a bit early. But a few months had gone on before I was totally doxxed.
And just from my perspective, right? Do you feel that campaign was successful? I mean, you got a lot of press and really exposed some of the behind the scenes of what was going on in that cult. What was your initial goal, and like how close or how well do you think you achieved that?
Well, so here's where I tell you the honest truth of everything, that this was entirely an accident. I mean, we uploaded that video thinking 200 people would watch it, another 50 would join IRC, and we'd have some fun. And it would last a couple weeks because everyone's got ADHD on the internet, and there's another cat video to go watch, and so we thought we'd lose everyone, and then I wake up to thousands and thousands, like there's an army there suddenly. And so we didn't plan anything initially. Initially, it was just let's have some fun, and this is going to be lulls. We're gonna laugh our asses off on this one. But as we get weeks into it, months into it, the plans start changing. Like we start realizing just how evil they are. They start coming at us a lot harder, and we start thinking, what can we do to them? And the one thing that we learned from a bunch of ex-Scientologists was exposure is the worst thing that could happen to them, right? So what you had seen was a news article in Time magazine in the early 90s, it was like 91, I think, titled Cult of Greed, I believe. And it had like 386 sentences in the article. And they had been sued per sentence. So they had been sued like 300 and something times. And even though they lost all of them, that wasn't the point. The point was to force Time to go to court that many times, waste all that money on lawyers, and convince them that their budget was better spent elsewhere and they shouldn't cover the cult anymore. So what could you do to get the media printing stuff about Scientology again? And you had to make it so outrageous that they couldn't ignore it, and so outrageous and unignorable that every media outlet out there covered it at once, giving them too many targets to go after, making it impossible for them to do what they were doing to that many people. And if you can't silence all of them, if you can't silence all of them, silencing one of them isn't going to help you. So just breaking through that barrier, I think, was the biggest thing we accomplished, because you'll see negative articles about them all the time. You'll see people writing funny stuff about Kirstie Alley supporting Trump as a Scientologist in like newspapers today. And they wouldn't have done that before what we did. And what that did is it cut into their recruiting. All the kids now know who they are and what they're really about. And so they're shrinking. Here in Boston, they lost their big, beautiful building on Beacon Street. They lost the building they were trying to renovate in South Boston. And they ended up in a small little office space off of the highway, I think in Brighton or Alston. Like it's like a 2-person office or something. Like, so I think we accomplished a lot. Yeah, I'm happy about it. I think it's funny.
But like you said, it seems to me in the same way you're talking about hacking, where you wanted to do something and you got a lot of positive feedback. You're like, oh, I'm good at this, and people are interested in this, and I'm a lot more successful than I thought I was going to be, and it just grows and grows and grows.
Yeah, pretty much. And every step of the way was just responding to outside stuff. Like if those people hadn't shown up, we don't decide to split the channels up. If that many cities aren't available, we don't come up with the idea to go hunting down what we can do in the cities. And I don't find that Tory video, like every step of the way, like we didn't plan it until other people did something and we had to respond.
Yeah. You had a lot more, like you said, there was a lot more people who hate that cult than you expected.
Yeah, I mean, a lot more people that knew that it was a cult than I expected. All I remembered of it was, isn't that thing Travolta's in? Before, like, we actually started fighting them, like, months before when the early planning started. But, like, the early planning was for how do we get all of them pizzas, and how do we blackfax them and turn their website off and stuff like that. It wasn't how do we put people in front of every single building. That was a whole different world.
Break the press open on them. So this is summer of '08. This is like right before the recession, and I know the next big thing that Anonymous was involved in was the Occupy Wall Street. And so what was the transition like? Now that you have all these people who are active and like, willing to show up, you've got these chat boards that, you were, in no small part kind of running and helping to organize. How did you guys transition? How did the Occupy Wall Street movement get started up?
Well, it's interesting because the stuff with Scientology, even 6 months in, was still because it was fun, right? I mean, 90% of our people were there because it was fun, and then some of us were starting to transition to actually caring and actually like having real activist sentiments kind of in our heads, for the first time. So at some point, 6, maybe 7 months in, I walk into my then roommate's room, who was a coworker at that computer repair place, and I looked him right in the eyes, and he wanted none of this. He had nothing to do with any of this. He was just some guy who lived his life and played D&D with friends. He was just uninvolved. I still love him to this day, but it just wasn't for him, right? And I walked in, and I knocked on his door, even though it was open, just so he would turn around from his computer. And he looked me right in the eye, and I had this look on my face of, I don't know what, but, to him, it was confusion. And I said, I think I care. And he had this shocked face, oh no, damn it. and he said, don't. And I was like, no, I think I care. I think we're gonna go harder on this one. And I think I might be an activist. I'm not sure yet, but something might have happened. And I just turned around and walked off at that point. But I knew the next day that he was scared. He thought I might go off and start doing 100 more illegal things or something. Now that I actually truly hated them and wasn't just doing this for fun. And it wasn't... We didn't get political or into things like Occupy for another little while. There was another few months, and then an operation just kind of fell in our lap. That showed us that we could do political things. In our heads, at least in Marble Cake, we all knew that we could put out a video or put out some graphics, and because we were the ones who would put out the early stuff, we had those channels available to us where people would see them and think, it's not official because it's anonymous. There's nothing official. You cannot give orders. You can't tell people what to do. But we kind of followed them once. Let's at least pay attention to this for a second, right? So we were getting attention. So we could put a video out. So what are we going to do next? And a guy shows up on IRC on the chat system, and he starts yelling in one of the channels that he needs to find whoever made that message to Scientology thing. And some people thought he might be angry, or he might be a Scientologist or something. Who knows? But someone who knew my handle on the IRC server, who was a friend of mine in real life who was on the server, messaged him saying, I'm not going to connect you to anyone, but I want to know why you're looking for them. And he said, oh, well, because I'm in Australia and this is about to happen. And when he explained it, my guy said, here's the name. Message him right now. And so I get a message from this guy, and his name was Tux, and he turned out to be awesome. I just love the guy. And we're sitting there, and he's explaining to me that in Australia, they keep trying to put filters on the internet, blacklists, and other things, because the government is saying all these made-up lies to convince the public with fear that it's time to filter the internet. And we're talking Saudi Arabia, Russian-level, China-level filtering they wanted to put on. I think some of it...
Screening out different information sources that you no longer can access.
They wanted to be able to block porn and put controls on stuff like that, and just all these other things. But also, you knew it was going to get abused for censorship, even though they swore it wasn't. You just don't get, Republican types pushing for censorship tools that don't then use them for censorship. It's not a thing. So he's asking us, what can you do? To which I responded, we're messing with Scientology and it's hilarious. What are you talking about? And he's like, no, seriously, what can you help? I need people. And I'm like, well, there are people on the server, but what am I supposed to do? I had no idea what we had in reality at that point. Even though we're 9 months in or whatever, I still don't get it. I just know that if I put out another video, people are going against Scientology in that way again. It's for the March one, we put out a video that it was going to be on L. Ron Hubbard's birthday. And so people made birthday cakes, we had that level of kind of ability to get people to do things, right?
Yeah.
And he's explaining to me, no, well, who made the last video you uploaded? I'm like, well, that guy's online. You want to talk to him? And so I made a little channel. I invited that guy in. And then he's like, okay, so how do you make a press release? I'm like, well, one of like the best writers we ever had is actually online right now. I'll bring him in. And by the end of like an hour, I've got like 20 people in a channel. They're all the best that have ever worked with us in the last 9 months. They're all talking to him. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to sleep. I don't know what's going on here, but I'm out. And the next morning, again, I get woken up. And there's people on the streets in Sydney and Melbourne and Perth and Adelaide with signs that are like shit they came up with in that channel overnight. I am getting woken up by a phone call from some 18-year-old who is somehow an aide or an assistant to a senator in Australia who got my phone number from one of the news organizations down there who wasn't supposed to give it out. But whatever, I guess.
Is this before you've been? This is after you've been doxxed, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I'm doxxed. So like, but like they still, they're not supposed to just give my personal phone number out, right? Like the news isn't supposed to do that. And I come to find out that overnight they have taken the big fear, which was the government telling everyone that if you went online and saw a woman with A-cup sized breasts or smaller, like totally flat, then over time, if you grew to like women with small breasts, you would start to like children. And so we had to block women with small breasts on the internet because it was actually making pedophiles. So give us the filter so we can block small breast porn. That was their argument. We're like, what the? So people on the chat had come up with calling it Operation Titstorm. And shout out to the channel there, calling it out before I said it. But yeah, it was Operation Titstorm. And the goal of the initial part of the operation was flood every message board, anything in Australia with an Australian address that was on the internet that you could upload a picture to, upload a picture of a woman with small breasts. Like, just go flood them. And I thought that was hilarious. But then they also came up with a good press release about stop it or else. Anonymous is now refocusing its eyes on you for a minute. And it was ominous and scary, and a video was done. And I enter the channel, and they're like, hey, great, here's your channel back. And I'm like, I didn't start this. They're like, yeah, you did. And I'm like, maybe I helped? They're like, you totally brought us all together. You did this thing. And I'm like, I guess I helped a little. Cool. So whatever. You guys did this, though. I was asleep. So I had them catch me up to speed. And then I called the senator back. I'm like, well, this is really easy. Like, they want you not to pass this thing so you don't then get the filters. So just stop it. Don't even have the vote. And he's like, well, we can't do that. The vote's going to happen. And I'm like, oh, well, then don't vote for it and convince all the others not to vote for it. And he's like, our emails are already getting leaked on the internet. Like, stuff is going quick. I'm like, oh, they haven't even started yet. If you're scared of that already, like, we're like 12 hours in. And he's like, is that a threat? And I'm like, no, I'm just like, this is what's happening. I don't have control of these people. Like, yeah, this is an update. Like, have fun. Like, I'm telling you to take a seat and watch because it's not going to be pretty. And so they hang up and go and confer with a bunch of other people. And I get a call from them again later that night. And they just say they're going to talk to people and try and get this slowed down and rethink it. And, a lot of other Titstorm takes down websites. People are in the streets with signs. But, within a couple weeks, the vote's happening. It doesn't go through, even though they pre-poll down there a lot. So they have a pretty good idea what the senators are going to vote for. And it was looking like 80% for. And when it went through, it was like 17% for. Like, they felt what had happened to them. And the quick lightning speed of, like, I'm asleep and it happens, And I'm sitting there trying to come to grips with, that was political. That was a senator. I was like, what? Yeah. We're not political. There were, in our groups, there were Republicans, Democrats, Catholics, Jews, there were Muslims, there, like, you name a religion, a race, there were whatever, like, we were made up of everything. And so it was, because it's kind of easy to get them all to go against Scientology. Now we're starting to get a little political and you start seeing factions, right? But at that point, we just didn't know what we had. But Titstorm kind of showed us that, hey, if we wanted to point things a little more political, we actually could. Huh. Yeah. What do we do with that? And that's kind of where a lot more of the political stuff started happening. Okay. It was like that revelation.
Yeah, that's how you wake up to because it sounds like before you just did not recognize the power that you had access to. Right?
It was so accidental. If we had built the power to have the power, I think, of course, we know what we've built, right? Yeah. But since it all just kept falling in our lap, I mean, like, I didn't go and find this Tux guy, or, like, some dude showed up on IRC asking for me, you know?
Yeah.
Like, again, it was an external, like, someone brought something to us, you know?
He recognized the power that you had before you did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And needed that for a political objective, and kind of kicked you off to become like what Anonymous became.
Yeah.
So were there a lot of operations, just a handful? Like
there were new ops coming up like every few days at that point. Most of them lasted minutes, hours. I mean, we had this thing where everyone started to really gain that confidence that Anonymous wasn't an organization, and it wasn't a group, and it wasn't any one person in control, and they really were buying the anyone can use the brand. So a ton of people started trying to use the brand. And that was the point. Like, how do you stop it if anyone can use it? Like, at any point that everyone who's ever used it is now dead, someone else could just start saying they are Anonymous, and there's nothing you can do about that. And we built it that way. And so people are, like, doing that at that point. And you run into this new kind of twist, for us at least, because a lot of people involved with this new stuff had never been involved with the earlier iterations of Anonymous, where it was more attacking and hardcore trolling and all of that stuff. And so they hadn't tried to start up really an op when Anonymous might not like the idea of them starting an op. So you might have an idea for an op and think that's great for Anonymous, and everyone who's ever said the word Anonymous thinks you're dumb for even having this idea, right? You know, that could be a thing. So we learned that there's three outcomes. There's, you put your idea out there, you attach the name to it, you've made a flyer, and you've uploaded an image, you made a video, I don't care what you did, you somehow announced Anonymous is doing this. And in it, you've made sure to do the one thing you have to do. Give the people who see it a way to contact you. Give them a chat server, give them something where they can come communicate, right? And now you're waiting. You're on this server. Hopefully people show up. Well, three things happen. One of three things happen. One, people show up and tell you that this is the best fucking idea they've ever heard. Thank you. Thank you. Oh my God, we're all in. Where do you want us to go and how do we start? You know, and you're not in a position of power at that point, but they're gonna listen to you because you're the one who had the idea. You probably have a lot more knowledge at that point on the subject, whatever it is. You want to oust your mayor. I don't really care what the thing is, right? It's just some kind of an op that's personal to you. So we're sitting there, and that happens. Great. Op approved. Let's go. You know, by kind of the collective, right? The second thing happens. Like, two people show up in your channel. They explain to you very clearly that you need to just leave here before anyone else shows up because this is stupid and it ain't happening. Bro, it's over. You dumb. And that's great. That's great because you actually want the guy to realize that he should probably run right now before the people who are mad at him for suggesting this show up. Because then option 3 happens. He's still in that channel after he's been told it's dumb. He's still using the name. And anyone who's ever used the name before is now like, you're making us look bad. And at that point, he becomes the target, and we learn that Anonymous is Anonymous's worst enemy. We learn that you better not use the name without the collective's consent, even though literally no one can tell you not to use the name. Like, people can come in and do things to you to make you understand that you should have done it better. And so for a while there, ops are starting every 5 minutes, and some survive because option 1 happened, and some fail because 2, and some people become targets of Anonymous because 3. And so it's just kind of random for, months and months and months until we start running into things like the government's running PIPA, the laws to try and censor the internet, and ACTA, and all these other things where Anonymous got involved, and then Occupy, and then the big Sony hacks and HB hacks. Like, all those other things start to kind of flow after that initial thing. Okay.
I think the biggest of kind of your big ops, unless you have some questions in the chat that you.
Well, yeah, I've got a couple there, and I gotta say, there was an AMA the other day on Reddit, and Ask Me Anything, and one of the old Anons coming forward saying like, yeah, I was kind of the guy who ran one of the earlier iterations, and it was still around for the newer stuff at that point, the 08 stuff, but he ran some of the earlier sites like 420chan. And 420chan had a board called Invasion. The people in it were called the Insurgency, and depending on which one of these chans you were on, some of them were Invasion, some were Insurgency, some were just either or, we don't care, right? But they were the internet hate machine. They were that version of Anonymous. they were not your friend, and this was only for fun. So there's no caring in the world. There's no activism. And so when we started doing all this stuff and started actually, like, we started caring, they started calling us all kinds of names and being mad at us for basically taking their thing. You know, they were anonymous, not us. And
chaotic neutral, and you were chaotic good. And
right, and they were unhappy with that. And this was one of those people. Although, I mean, he's definitely changed his views. But for a while, I couldn't really talk about some of those earlier people because, well, they hadn't talked about themselves, you know. And this is anonymous. I'm not outing anyone. A lot of people knew him by handle as one of the early people, but his handle was Curtainer, and I really always never know if I'm saying that right, but whatever. And he helped run an op. And this op was the Epilepsy Foundation op. And the goal of this op was, you see all these people with morals over here suddenly using the name, and you see them doing like activist-y shit. We're going to show the world what Anonymous really is. And so they made these strobing, flashing GIFs and videos that would give anyone with, you know, serious epileptic problems fits, and they'd fall out of their chairs, some of them like in serious medical distress. And they went to any forum where, you know, people with epilepsy were, or anywhere where they knew people with epilepsy would see it, and they were posting these videos and these GIFs. And it caused a lot of people a lot of problems. And they did it straight in Anonymous's name, so I, for weeks, was dealing with news agencies reaching out like, hey, so why did you do that? And I'm like, I didn't do shit. But, you know, like, and I kept trying to explain to them, like, there's no monolith here. There's no one place. That was these other guys over here who also get to use the name, and I can't say they're not anonymous. So, yeah, Anonymous did it, but I didn't. And they never got it. They just, that's a hard thing back then for people to wrap their heads around. These days, more people get it.
Now, right? Yeah. Like, that's the fear of, like, you know, being in a democracy or being in any group where the people really have the say is,
right.
The people have the say for the good or the bad.
But
Anonymous definitely had both.
But in the AMA on Reddit, he was asked what his biggest regret related to all this was, and he instantly, right, first thing he said was the Epilepsy Foundation. He was really sorry for that one. That was the one he was feeling. And in talking to him after and during all of that, I really do believe him. I believe he knows how that was. He knows what a young, stupid kid he was. And yes, that chat is being read. And so I can see you over there. I have no idea how long the lag is. This is my first time ever doing this, though. But yeah, so, you know, that happened.
Yeah, that's really... I think that's important to address, though, right? Like, with this organizing, you know, it being anonymous and the power that it has, like, we want to do good stuff. You got to a point where you're like, oh, I really care, but it's scary in some ways. If run amok, it could really, like, cause a lot of serious damage to a lot of people.
Yeah, and as you push it forward and you gain more coverage, like, you end up knowing that people are going to use it for bad, and that you're the one that now has become kind of this face on the news that talks about it. Yeah. And in that weird spot, you find out that, you know, sometimes your name is used for evil. And we ended up, you know, having conversations about, like, do we do anything different? And, of course, one, it had already, you know, before we even showed up, been kind of built in a way where we could not do anything about that, right? It was built this way. It was going to be used this way. And all the imagery, the Guy Fawkes masks, everything else, it was all built out in a way where you just couldn't stop it. It was going to work this way. So do we accept that? And turns out, yeah, totally. If you want an idea like this to live, you have to put up with the fact that it can be used for anything. There's pro-Trump people who have used it to try and get him reelected. Like, I've seen anonymous ops that, like, nothing we can do about that. That's just... They're absolutely anonymous, too. Capital A anonymous. Those are anons. They might be brand new to it, and they might not be liked by any of the other anons, but here we are. You just have to put up with that's the fact.
And this is skipping ahead, right? Because I do really want to, like, talk in some depth about the Wall Street movement. But, you know, we are talking about the broadness that anonymous is, and QAnon has been pretty pervasive over the last year with, you know, the re-election effort and our political conversation right now. And I did want to hear your thoughts about, like, the evolution of anonymous, QAnon, and, like, how you see that developing, what you would like to see from it, whether you have any influence over it, that kind of stuff.
I would like everyone who believes themselves to be a follower of Q, who self-describes as QAnon, or who thinks that WWGA1 blah 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 hashtag is smart, to get hit by a bus going really fast. Yeah, no, their usage of the name is absolutely disgusting. They are horrible people, and it originally was a joke that turned into a play to sell online merch because people were falling for it, and the people who were posting the initial posts on the chans put up one of those print-on-demand shops where you could buy Q merch with like shirts and hats and shit, and it worked for a couple weeks. And so they plotted a plan to get a couple large YouTubers into the idea, and they got some who posted about it, and it went from there. And in the end, it's over on Jim Watkins' sites, just running amok. But the very initial, like, this is funny, we're gonna fuck with people, was, on the chans, and it was a couple guys, and they were only going to do it for a short period, and then they made some money off of the joke print a shirt with the Q stuff on it thing, and they were like, oh, well, let's keep going. And it's just a bunch of fucking grifters using idiots to profit. That's what it is, and I hope they all get hit by a bus. Like, one at a time, though, because I really want them each individually to feel the impact.
Yeah.
That's where I am.
Is there any, and again, this is like, I think further ahead, but like, is there any taking Anonymous back? Like you said, it's Anonymous is what Anonymous is. Like, is there any way to reclaim that?
Oh yeah. That's one of the reasons that Kurt actually showed back up. Kurt Tainer there. He's back around because he's decided that QAnon needs to go, and that he's sick of them using the name. And in one of the chats that I saw him talking, he was very clear on, after like 12 years of letting Anonymous do this, while I had been one of the originators of it, it's time to come take the damn name back. And so I do think a lot of very talented old schoolers with a thing in this fight, they want. I think they're back, and I think they're gonna take the name back by doing ops that are bigger. I mean, the way you take the name back is to be the version of Anonymous that's getting talked about.
Yeah.
And
reframe. We live in an attention economy.
Exactly.
That attention,
and they're going to crush it.
More positive and more impactful.
Damn straight, Dev Null.
Chat questions?
Yeah. Every time you see my eyes do this, it's because I'm looking at chat. And yeah, we never left. Just for some reason, the media likes talking about QAnon. It's time to make the media talk about Anonymous again.
Yeah. What are some of the chat questions you have popping up?
Mostly just people chiming in with their opinion on QAnon too, which is the same as mine. So we're all in agreement that QAnon can go fuck itself. I'm sure this is all hurting my ability to get monetized when I put this over on YouTube. Oh well.
Worth it. This is it.
Thanks, man.
Your true opinions out there for the extra dollars or whatever.
You too.
So I do want to talk about Occupy Wall Street, because for me, I'm pretty young, and I would think I was in high school. I was like pre-political, like when that movement was happening, and that was a pretty eye-opening and rough time for a lot of Americans. How did you get involved with that? How did that blow up? Like, how was Anonymous fueling the Occupy Wall Street movement?
So we're all just being our standard anonymous selves. We're all online. The Occupy movement was getting pushed by a group out in New York, and the media wasn't covering it as much as it looked like it should. At that point, I had relatively good access to a large Twitter account. By today's numbers, it's not large, but by those numbers it was. I mean, it was nearing 1 million subs. 1 million followers, sorry. I'm learning all this Twitch speak. But it was 1 million followers on Twitter there, And it was URAnon News. And I thought that if they started pushing a little harder on the Occupy side of things and had some good graphics and maybe a couple videos saying Anonymous was going to get involved, that, you know, you'd get things like the New York Times suddenly covering Anonymous joins Occupy. And, you know, it's a different kind of vibe than just here are a bunch of, you know, hippies getting intense, which is really not what it was going to be anyways, but it's how the media was portraying it. Yeah. And when you add that ominous nature, and that was really when the media still liked to play our, you know, our voice in that dark, deep, computerized, and really give us that ominous feel. You know, they loved it. They ate it up. They want those clicks, right? And so it worked too, because we started pushing it like just for a couple days. And a couple days in, you start seeing New York Times, LA Times, and all these other big articles come out saying Anonymous goes to Wall Street. And they're all talking about Occupy now and what's going to happen. And so we all start talking and planning and joining, and the websites go up and the Twitters go up. And you find a lot of older Anons helping to run, like the @Occupy Wall Street Twitter handle was actually run by a bunch of people who were also Anons before that. And, you know, you just start seeing all this, you know, crossover happening. And you also start seeing online that it looks like there's going to be thousands of people showing up to this thing, not just, you know, hundreds. So I do think that Anonymous hopping on board kind of changed that narrative a little, because instead of 1,000 people showing up, 20,000 people were paying attention now, right? And that's one of the things that I think Anonymous brought to the table. And it was a concerted effort on our part, on the people who were then really self-identifying as Anonymous, to make that exactly happen. So I was there day one in New York to see how this thing kicked off and, you know, see what was going on. And I'm going to be blunt here for people who aren't going to like that I say it, but my first experience with Occupy was negative. We are standing there, and I am dead front, and you've been in enough protest type events where there's a march and there's a couple banners up front. I'm in front of the banner, and there's thousands of people behind me. And so, like, I'm up front. Like, there's no one between me and the cop line. But there's only 4 cops in front of us. All the others are off at the park. We're looking at Wall Street, actual Wall Street. 4 cops. And I'm looking around like, here we go. And the cops start talking to the crowd, saying, the park's over there, it's got room for you, da-da-da-da. And before I know it, everyone from behind me turns down the street in the direction the cops had pointed and walk over to Zuccotti Park. Now, the goal was to use Zuccotti Park for other things, but, like, we had enough people that those cops would have moved if all the thousands of us walked forward. They would not have been able to hold their ground. So the first thing these people did was cede Wall Street itself to the cops. Like, day one, first move. And I'm just like, oh, okay, here we go. Luckily, that wasn't how things were to go. But that first move, I was like, oh boy, what did we do? You know? We get over to the park, and it starts, you know, you start seeing the organizing starting. You start seeing people put up tents to take in food donations. You start seeing, like, all the stuff that you were hoping was going to happen, and people using their skill sets to help the whole crowd there, and teaching, you know, because it was all outside. So there were a lot of people standing there who were saying, I'm going to sleep here tonight, who had never even been camping in their life. So, you know, there were people walking around teaching people, all right, when you do this, do that. You know, they were just, here's how hand warmers work, you know. I mean, like, there was a lot of that going on. Yeah, we did that for a couple days, and I ended up deciding that I wanted to head back to Boston. My goal coming back to Boston was to set up in Boston with the idea that if you started another one, it would instantly not be just Occupy Wall Street. It would be Occupy the movement. So if we could get Boston up and running, other cities would see that and see that we've pushed it out through those same channels and realize, oh wait, we should do that. You know, it wouldn't just be, let's watch what happens in New York on the news at night. It would be, where's our tents? And so, yeah.
When it comes to the New York movement, you said that, you know, you go back to Boston with the intent of, let's not make this a singular moment. Let's make this kind of a national or international thing.
Yeah.
What was your intent when you went down to New York to march with Occupy there?
Well, you know, my intent there was that I had never done something exactly like that before in my life. You know, in our history as activist types over the last, like, 40 years, there have been multiple actual tent city style protests in this country, where they've taken over government land and said, we're holding this until you do X, Y, or Z. So I'd never done anything like that before. I had never gone to like a global style protest thingy that wasn't one of our, Scientology ones. I'd gone to some state level ones and a couple countrywide ones when we were going up against some censorship online stuff, but it's just an entirely different feel. So for me, my initial was, what is this going to be like? What type of person flies in from around the world to come to this thing? Am I going to get along with them? Am I that type of person? Do I fit in here? And there was a lot of anxiety too. Like, I'm not an outdoorsy kind of guy. Again, the computer hackery type isn't usually the guy up on the trail climbing the mountain. I mean, it's just how it is. I know some who are, so, not disparaging you. Good job out there. But that ain't me. So I had anxiety, just trying to see who was going to show up. Were they going to be the type of people who could organize? Were there enough people there where the few of us who had organizational experience weren't going to have to carry the load? Like, I didn't want to run this thing. I wanted to make sure that, like, I show up, this looks good, awesome, guys, I'm out. Because I wanted to get back to Boston and get things going. And luckily, it looked like that, and it went that way.
Yeah. So as you go back to Boston, how successful was it to get set up in Boston and kind of have it multiply from there?
I didn't get it set up in Boston. By the time I'm back home, sitting down, resting off of the bus, and I wait an hour or so to catch my breath and just I put my clothes away. I go to sit down on Facebook and create an event, because most of the Boston organization was even happening on there at that time. And there's already one set up by some other guy. And I'm like, okay, here we go. I don't have to work hard at this one. They're ready for it. So I say I'm going, and I get there the next night. We're on the Common in Boston, and we're standing at the Parkman Bandstand, which is like this giant kind of marble and stone gazebo. And we're talking out, what does this look like? Where are we going to go? What are we going to occupy? And, there were... depending on, people only lasted a few minutes to a couple hours, but depending on what time it was, at our height, there were like 40, 50 people standing around, like, trying to figure this out. And the guy who had originally called for it is standing up on the bandstand talking to everyone, and we got really lucky because, this was my first time attempting to be involved in something that, you would consider direct action and direct democracy. Those old school things where you've got hand signals and stuff. I don't know what these hand signals are. I didn't stay in Occupy New York long enough to memorize all that shit, right? Yeah. One of the kids from down in New York had come up at the same time I had to visit friends in Boston and had come over, and he had been one of these progressives who was like ahead of the curve. So he knew all the hand signals, how democracy worked, how consensus building worked in groups like this, how... you didn't have to know one person in the crowd, but we were getting an answer and a vote was going to work here, that kind of a thing. And he also really had a deep understanding, and we're talking, a decade ago, but a deep understanding of inclusive language. So when we put this stuff together, we weren't leaving anyone out. And so he sat up on kind of the side, and you know the bandstand. A lot of my viewers won't, but it's just this gazebo. So he sat up kind of on the edge of it while we were sort of organizing, and he kept chiming in every now and then when we were doing it wrong. And then finally we asked him to, could you do a few things for us? And he started talking and telling us things, and his handle online was Guy. So if anyone's out there, if Guy ever sees this, thanks, Guy. Love you, Guy. But he taught us the direct democracy stuff, and then by the end of it, we're using those hand signals to vote on what location we're going to go to, and we chose Dudley. We go over there, a couple of us to scout and to get a feel for it, and great, we're all going to be back this weekend to take the thing. And I show up early, and I'm sitting there just cross-legged in the field, that is the square, waiting, and I'm the first one just sitting there. And this guy rides up on a bike with a big camera looking like he knows what he's doing with the camera. And what do I know from a camera? I still to this day don't know what aperture means. I think it has something to do with like the thing is open or not. I don't know. But he's sitting there with these giant lenses and stuff, right? And he comes over and he kind of does this thing. And he says, "Are you here for the thing?" And I'm like, "Yeah, cool. I was waiting for someone else to show up." And that's a local guy who ended up on city council and doing a bunch of other work after this. So we kind of led people down some interesting paths. We ended up with multiple occupiers in Boston who ended up on city councils. One who ended up in our state house now. Maybe two. I don't know. There might be a second, but I know of those three people. And so we accomplished some stuff at ours, I think, even if it was just that. But it was Nadim Mason. And Nadim is just awesome. I love him. I know everyone's got their opinions on people. I think most people love him. But we sat there talking for a few minutes, and he said he was going to get back on his bike and ride around and try and gather up anyone who looked like they were looking for the spot but couldn't find it, right?
Yeah.
And he ended up showing back up a couple times with people. And then this guy showed up on a golf cart. And he's looking all official, and he's got this logo that says Greenway, and that's what the name of that area was, where all the little parks were. And I walk over to him, and he says his name is Steve, and I'm like, "What's up? What are you doing?" And he's like, "We know what's happening." And I'm like, "Are you here to stop it? Because you can't, because there's going to be enough people here that you aren't enough." And he's like, "No, but, the cops will be here later tonight, and just to make sure that, please don't destroy things." And I'm like, "What do you mean destroy things?" And I'm like, "Well, if you were to do X, Y, and Z, we wouldn't have to do ABC, right?" Like, I was like trying to start negotiations with this guy who was obviously kind of head of groundskeeping and kind of, I think, the guy they sent in to be lead negotiator at that point. And there's only like 5 people there at the park at this point. And people start seeing me doing that, but like, I was talking to him because no one else was. Like, literally, if anyone else had stood up, I would have stayed sitting down. But everyone just watched him start walking around the perimeter like he's all official and shit. And I was like, no, someone needs to have this conversation. So we ended up, by end of day, he had opened up one of their electricity outlets on the wall of one of the buildings next to the park and given us electricity. And I'd explained to him that it was going to get opened up the wrong way, or you could have your lock in your box and everything fine now, and we could work to protect it because you gave it to us, instead of the trashing it's going to get when you don't give it to us. And that's not a threat, guy. It's just what's going to happen. I'm going to be at home asleep one night, and people are going to want to charge their phone, and that box is coming off of that thing. Sorry. I know humans. This is going to happen. Yeah. So after a few minutes, he was like, it would be better. And it was behind a row of like flowers and little kind of plants and whatnot. And I was like, and if you let us run an extension cable right now, so we have that on this side, people won't walk and trample all your stuff. I'll do it and I'll be respectful. And so he came back with a big extension cord and said, here you go, it's unlocked. And first day one, we had the power on. And it was time to set up the media tent. That's kind of how we kicked off, Boston. But it wasn't all happy. I mean, at that point, it looked like, well, maybe the Greenway is going to be a little nice and back off and let us have the space to do what we wanted. They wanted us out as fast as possible. I mean, I think that was more him not wanting the rest of us to stand up and be all like, no, you're opening it now. Like, I think he felt like it was happening either way. But we weren't trying to be threatening to him personally. It was just, I think he saw what was going to happen.
It was part of the bigger thing. So when it came to, you said, the Greenway and the city of Boston trying to get you out as quickly as possible, how successful were you with negotiations with them, with some of the reframing and the economic inequality that was why you were there in the first place?
Yeah, we started talking to them about, like, here are the reasons we're here. Here's what we're hoping to accomplish. And basically what was said was, well, we're a nonprofit working to do all of this X, Y, and Z, so, like, we love you guys. But secretly behind things, we knew that their board members were all, these millionaire, downtown Boston socialites, and they weren't actually on our side.
Them having nonprofits means that they are bandaging some of the wounds that they are actually creating.
Yeah, the things that are helping them build their bank accounts are the things that they're also trying to then solve with their own nonprofits. Like, come on. Yeah. But, here we are, right?
They also get to write off in their taxes.
Exactly. And I don't even like, what? Like, I'm sitting here like, yeah, write off, sure, that means something. Now I know because, like, I've done some things with businesses, but, like, at that point, I'm like, whatever, sure. They said, we're not going to tell the cops to get you off, and I said I'd love to see them try. And, the first couple conversations were like that. They calmed it down, and we're like, okay, so just don't destroy things, please. And at that point, we lasted about 2 months here. We were one of the last things standing when all the other occupies were gone, when Oakland had been raided like 20 times and people had been shot by the cops. The cops here had raided a couple times, had arrested people, but comparatively, we had it relatively easy. Like, they still took bulldozers to the camp and took everyone out, but, we didn't end up with people dead. Like, some occupies ended up, like, out in California with a guy shot, like, by the cops. And sure, it was a rubber bullet, but, it hits your eye. It's not gonna do a good thing. But yeah, that was like 2 solid months of just that working out. And luckily, I was working a job that I could almost do from my iPad at that point. So, like, I could spend a lot of time, at the camp and doing things. But I had kids, so I had to every night go home to deal with, making sure that, I was dealing with the kids, That was their first introduction, too, because they were 4 and 6 when they first came down to Occupy. And we made them hold signs that they could understand. They weren't allowed to hold a political sign if they didn't understand what it meant. So the 4-year-old held up the sign that said honk. And the 6-year-old held up a sign that said, I'm 6 and what is this?
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
So,
But now the Anonymous brand is very political at that point. Like, when the media thinks of Anonymous, they're not thinking of just trolls anymore. They're thinking of political activists.
Yeah. For one cause or another, people who are collecting anonymously to make something happen.
Yeah.
Now, I know that, you're talking a lot about your experience specifically with Boston and income inequality, but there were a lot of political ops that happen internationally too. Were you involved in any of those?
A fair amount of them for the first couple years of it. We ended up in this weird spot where there was a place you could go and find people who had run bigger ops before, specific IRCs. So there would just be people showing up there to organize their op, and then randomly one of them would be a big enough op that someone who knew one of our names would come find us and say, hey, they need your help. And, I'm nothing special at that point. I'm just some guy, and like I've said a million times here, like, stuff just kept falling in my lap. I didn't, like, plan these things. I'm not, like, some genius or anything. Like, it just fell in my lap every time. But by that point, I had so many points of contact that could do things. So you need an image, you need some iconography, you need a press release, you need this media contact because they said something about you that wasn't true and you want to refute it. I had all of that. So they were showing up hunting us down to like, hey, can you help us with our op? And so I worked on hundreds of ops at that point. Every country, like with the SOPA PIPA thing, in ACTA, there were laws here that we were fighting, but then there were laws in Europe that we were fighting that weren't here. Like they were all kind of extensions of the same ways of kind of fighting for our freedoms online and against censorship. And so we worked just as hard on the European ones as we worked on the US ones because we knew in the end, if it was anywhere, it was everywhere. It's the internet.
Yeah. Once one government figures out how they can censor or limit our online speech, all of them are going to copy that model and use that nation as an example.
Yeah.
So I guess we have like half an hour. I'm not sure how strict your time is on this, right?
It's whenever.
A lot of you talk about it falling into your lap, but it really does seem like at some point you have an aptitude, whether it's the technological piece or just being a person who is okay with finding lots of contacts and helping connect them to people, which is, I would say, the heart of organizing.
Yeah.
And a lot of your drive seems to be focused around internet freedom. So I think that as we're kind of like rolling it out, what do you see you doing in the future, Anonymous doing in the future of like the fight for online freedom and freedom of speech? Like, what are your thoughts on how a lot of these things go forward? Because you haven't, as far as I know, been, hyperactive and anonymous over the last, 5-10 years?
Yeah, I'd say the last 5 years I've been less active than I was in the beginning, but I still respond. I still help when I'm asked. It's just rarer and rarer that I get asked anymore because the ops have gone in ways where I am just like, I'm never touching QAnon unless I can destroy them,
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of stuff like that happening more recently. When an op shows up that I really like, I feel I'm gonna say, do you want any of my help? And if they do, I'll offer assistance. But we all know I'm not anonymous lowercase a anymore. I'm all over there's documentaries about me at this point. Like, I can't hide, right? But I still consider myself capital A anonymous. Like, I'm still, happy to be involved. And it's down to the right ops showing up for me to want to, get behind at this point and offer any help. Although a lot of them also don't need me anymore. Early on, you remember like the days back in MySpace, like planning events online was a lot harder then than it is now. So a lot of the things that we used to be really good at that were really hard to do online, those tools have become so democratized, so available, that that a lot of those skill sets aren't as necessary as they were. Now it's more about contacts and just time and having the right frame of mind to do that kind of work. One of the things we've always talked about with Anonymous is its kind of duocracy nature. It's not a true meritocracy or anything like that, because one, those don't exist, and when they do, they go horribly wrong. But we called it a duocracy. It's show up and do what you're good at. So in our duocracy model, it seemed in the end that my skill set was management, and that sounds horrible because every movie and TV show you see, the middle managers are the worst human beings. But, when it got down to it, I was good at bringing a channel of people together that got stuff done. And so you end up in this situation with, especially like anonymous style ops, where they're not taking orders from you. They do not want you to be telling them what to do, but they've come to a realization that when ops are being run the way you're running them, they seem to get done. So they're currently taking some lead from what you're saying and what you're trying to get them to do, but you have no power. They will replace you in a second if you overstep that bounds. Like, it's just your skill set, right? So my skill set was that. We had graphic artists, we had researchers, we had people who just for some reason had too much time and admitted to not having other skill sets. I don't know what they really had, but like maybe they were plumbers and just knew that wasn't going to help us, right? But so we needed all kinds of research. Like, we need a spreadsheet of everyone's name who's ever done X, because this op is going to go after them, right? Like that kind of a thing. So you would bring your skill and then use that skill. Mine was kind of running ops for a while. We got you done.
And now you're saying that in some ways, either those contacts have changed or the group has changed overall. How do you see yourself being plugged into activism? Like, now that these things have been, or actually another question I want to ask first before I ask that question.
Sure.
You talked about the democratization of these organizing tools, right? Like, where anyone can set up a Facebook event, or anyone can log something on a Meetup or GroupMe or
Eventbrite, or
Slack is
you can use Google Docs or an open source alternative, Trello, or there's 1,000 tools we have these days that we did not have back then.
How do you think this has changed digital organizing, right? Because to me, this makes it more accessible for lots of people, but I don't see the same types of movements pop up, at least in my eyes, that with the infamy that Anonymous had in 2008, 2009.
It's a double-edged sword, right? Because you end up with, now that they're so accessible to try and set something up and run something, people without the skill sets to accomplish that with lesser tools are now organizing things. And those same people who couldn't have accomplished it 10 years ago without these we hand feed you everything tools aren't probably the best organizers. So you run into the situation with massive burnout, right? People only have so much time, and honestly so much stress they can have in their life. In terms of activism, there's a lot of stress and anxiety and everything else. No matter how strong your constitution is, I don't want to hear it. You have been stressed out, like everyone has been, right? Yeah. And so there's a lot of grasping for your attention as an activist. There are 600 things today that wanted me to pay attention or retweet them or do something, right? And I have to pick through that and pick the ones that I'm willing to give some time to. And I think that's been causing a lot more burnout than we used to get, because they were tighter run ships and there were less of them. So that's been the only negative I've seen, is that we just get a lot more ops being run by people who don't know how to actually run. Be it even like just a normal old nonprofit, some new intern who's now running an event, and you see 5 people show up, and it's like, because you didn't do these 50 steps that are needed. And I know those 50 steps because back when we didn't have these tools holding our hands, we had to do this all manually. And so I think I would be in their same shoes. I am not better than them. I think I would make the same mistakes today that they make with these tools if I hadn't gone through trial by fire before. You
had to do hard mode and get a lot of repetitions in doing it in a very difficult manual style, in a way that those of us coming up and organizing now just don't have to suffer through that. We don't learn it to the same depth.
Yeah, and that's fine. You just have to, realize that and start moving to those depths, right? And also, again, it's down to your attention. How much time do you have to give to this and also still feed yourself and house yourself, right?
Yeah.
Very few of us activists pay our bills with activism. I still never have. I have been poor since this started. I haven't held down a job longer than months, since this all started. And I'm okay with that. My bank account is negative, people. Subscribe if you're watching, by the way, because my stuff is negative, and some help would be cool. I'd like to eat tomorrow. I don't know. But that's because all my time is spent doing some form of activism or planning for some form of activism. A lot of it lately has been a little more local, so it hasn't been online as much, so people aren't seeing as much. They're more just seeing me projecting on Twitter, because, I'm very loud and opinionated on Twitter. But, yeah, I think my go forward, to kind of hark back to that question you were kind of going with here, is this show and trying to get more of those ops and those people and those actions and activities that are coming up that I see as having real legs, that I see as something that needs to get attention, finding the people organizing them, getting them on the show, talking to them, seeing what they're doing, letting the world know, I think that's going to be where I want to go with this. I don't want to just have shows where we talk about the latest news. We're going to, half the show every day is going to be can you believe what this politician did? Everyone go get him. Here's his home phone number. I'm going to be doing that nonstop, so get ready for some fun. But the other half of it is going to be, here's the action you should take now. And if you want to listen to me, great. And if you don't, hey, I'm just some guy. You don't listen. That's fine. But I really want to be inspiring action. Yeah.
And one of the reasons that I was super happy to talk to you, and one of the things that I want to get out of this, even though I'm kind of acting as the interviewer for you,
right,
is both as an organizer and then as someone who just a couple of years ago started to care.
Right. You had that moment too, didn't you?
Yeah.
Right.
And I can talk to you about that at some other point.
Yeah.
But how do I know, or how do people listening know, either as someone who cares or someone who's organizing, where to find that focus? Because I think that, one of the things that we all recognize is we are inundated with information. There's just too much for us to consume, to critically analyze, to, filter through. And what would you say are your thoughts or your best steps on how to figure out what we're going to get involved with, because we do only have so much time, so much stress that we can manage.
I mean, this is surprisingly easy compared to what people think. Burnout is related to how much attention you can give something that you're not just obsessed with, right? If this isn't your absolute obsession in life, you're going to get burned out. If you think of nothing else, then burnout's almost impossible on a topic. But, look at the QAnon people, right? They just, holy crap. But, burnout is, for me, a lot related to just doing too much, bearing too much of the load in some kind of an activist activity, and having too many people relying on you that you are letting down. Not because you're the kind of guy who tries to let people down, but because you've got 10 requests for your time tomorrow, and you've agreed to them all. No, all of that is secondary to step one. You look at the things that you want to put your time into, and which one makes you smile. Which one is the one that you're when we freaking win this one, I'm going to feel it. I know that winning this one is going to make me, I'm going to remember this on my dying bed. Find those. There are people who they run little small homeless shelters. I'm talking the homeless shelters that have like 10 people in them, right?
Yeah.
But every day they see those 10 people, and it fills them with nothing but happiness to help, right? That's their one thing. Sure, they could be focused on some statewide homelessness cause that's helping bring homeless people into better affordable housing and all this other stuff. Sure. And that needs help. And it needs as many people who can focus on it who can, right? But that one person found that thing that is activist related, that is helping other humans, that puts that smile on their face that isn't going to burn out. And I would say when you're first looking at something that someone's brought to you, do you think that you're going to get that out of it? Because if you're not, you might burn out. And so use that as an initial filter. Maybe you still have to focus on it because you know this is a week-long thing and it ends in a week, so whatever. But when you're looking at bigger, longer things, like let's say you were one of the early people on the ranked choice voting stuff, which was years ago here in Massachusetts, and it's been going since, and we lost, right? But there are some reasons for that. But those are other things for not now. But we lost, and a lot of people
in the know about that one too.
Yeah, a lot of people put a lot of effort in there, and they did it for years. And I saw people burn out during it, but I also saw the people that had made that right choice in the beginning, that changing the voting system was where their heart was. That if they got one thing accomplished with life, their kids were going to vote a better way, so they had better, more representative democracy, more inclusive democracy. And you couldn't convince them otherwise. Every day, how much time can I give to this thing, right? That's the person you also want in your activity. You want them on your activism. So I would say the best thing you can do for yourself is use that filter. The second best thing you can do in activism is identify when someone might be a great person, might still be getting stuff done, but you've identified they don't really belong in this one. They're upset, they're getting angry, they're getting mad at other people in it. They keep saying, well, this needs to get done. You know what? F it, I'm going to do it myself because none of you are getting shit done. Like when you find that guy, have that conversation with them about maybe there's other activism you could be doing where you're happy doing it instead of so upset every day. Because the happier we are, the more we're going to get done and the less we're going to burn out. So I use that as my very first filter. That right there, like that is the beginning, and that cuts 90% of it out. Yeah. Then from there, it's, who's talking to you. Some 13-year-old who's mad at something, great for them. I'm so happy they're on it. But, like, at the same time, they're probably not going to accomplish a big enough goal here, so instead I would redirect them to someone else's, nonprofit, a thing that they could maybe start talking to, so in a couple of years they could intern there, stuff like that, right? But I see some 31-year-old woman in a town with a mayor who did this, who somehow got reelected, who needs to be protested against. I'm like, all right, explain this to me a little more. I know some people in that area, I'll give the, like you have to make sure you don't stretch yourself so thin.
Okay. And using, like you're saying, a lot of self-reflection to figure out what your real drives are. Like, this is the issue I care about. Like me looking at myself, this is the issue I care about, and filtering out noise that's going to burn me out from being able to accomplish that thing.
Have you ever done the psychological trick where you flip a coin and at the top, before it even lands, you already know what you wanted? Try that with two activism things that you are putting way too much time into right now, and tell yourself that when that coin lands, you're only doing one of them. You are dropping one because you don't have the energy anymore to give out, and you need to focus. If we're getting UBI, we need people like you 100% of the time. I understand there's housing issues, there's homelessness issues, there's Medicare for all issues. Someone's got to be focused on this one thing, though. Like, that has to happen, right? So flip that coin, see what happens. You'd be surprised. It works here, too.
The other thing I want to ask about is, I know a lot of people who care but have not started getting into activism, and it's not like they are apathetic to the needs
right.
and harms that exist around us, but they don't know the steps to get involved. And you got involved very early in your life in a very intense way.
It was, yeah.
Most people are not going to follow that trajectory.
No.
But I think there are definitely ways for them to get involved, to start getting active, and they may or may not know what their main issue or cause is. What are some of the, I think, stepping stones for them to do something? At the end of the day, you don't want to burn people out, but I think that it is important, almost imperative for all of us to be intentional about adding some good into this thing.
We used to call that the fight for small wins. So that when we had new people that we knew were going to be capable of doing things, but they weren't activists yet, they weren't even signaling that they wanted in, but we could tell that's a good person who, given the chance, would definitely be in on all these. They'd be right beside us at the front of the line when the cops start pepper spraying, you know? Like, or whatever. Or, again, they're at a food bank volunteering their time. I don't care which version of activism you're doing, just get out there and do something. We would fight to figure out what the smallest thing we could do that would give them the endorphins and dopamine hit that the brain gives you when it's happy that you did something. And so what is the smallest win for some local political organizer to get out of someone? The smallest win is honestly a Sunday afternoon after church or whatever, and a small local election for, I don't care, school board, whatever. And getting that person to stand out there on a street corner when they're doing a standout and they're all holding the signs and getting the cars to honk. That takes no real effort other than standing or sitting. I mean, no ableism here. You can be in a wheelchair, whatever. You just got to be there and have that sign up, right? And then you can go home. And after that, the people who are going to get into that level of local stuff are going to reach back out to the person who invited them, like, hey, what's next? Or they're going to see the next post asking for people and say, I had fun there. They're going to meet friends there. They're going to meet people there that they then start talking to. Maybe they go out to dinner with, you know, whatever, right? But, like, the littlest win you can come up with, the least effort you can hand that person is what you're looking for, because you just want that one win. Once they have a taste, I mean, I know I sound like a drug dealer at this point, but, like, once they have that taste, if they're our type, they're gonna start going down that path. Right? That's how we used to do it, and I mean, we spent years working on how to get people into little things. But the standouts, and talking to some high level Democratic organizers, like the standouts is one of their tricks for specifically that. Like, it almost draws in no votes, but it does make people happy and give them those endorphins and make them want to keep going.
Wow. Okay.
Small wins.
For me, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's good info for me, and I think for anybody else who's listening to this, trying to figure out how to step up, you know, their organizing game, right? Because I think a lot of us are competing against a broad swath of, like, you know, options right now.
Thanks to everyone in the chat. You know, as this goes on, I'll get better at thanking people. But Wollendov and The Apprentice there, thanks for being around. Thanks for Jeremy McWormy. And I think A. McGuffin and Dev Null, you know, all the people that are here.
Do you have any more chat questions that you want to answer right now?
I mean, the only question mark sitting there that I see is how do we balance freedom of speech and social responsibility? I think we're entering a new era of the internet. Well, so this is the rub, right? This is Twitter censoring Donald Trump and you saying, but free speech. Well, then you get into something that I would say everyone should go study up on, and it is called the paradox of tolerance. And free speech should only go up until it hits that paradox. And that is 99.999999999% free speech. But at some point, you can't have someone saying they're about to go kill someone of a certain level of importance online that also convinces other people to join them in that thing, right? Like, there's a certain level of speech that has to be monitored and dealt with on these types of platforms. And the paradox of tolerance ended up coming out thanks to Nazis, and it's coming back up thanks to Nazis. And you run into this situation where right-wingers will scream, you have to let me talk in your public square, because free speech, First Amendment, freedom of the press, whichever thing they want to do, right? And when you're sitting there talking to them about the fact that, no, I don't, they say, but free speech, you don't stand for America. And I'm like, well, no, I do stand for America, just paradox of tolerance. So what you run into is tolerant people should be tolerant. That means you're tolerant of someone else's speech. However, an intolerant person will only be tolerant until they're powerful enough to stop it. And the second they get enough power to end your free speech, they're going to. So the paradox arose in Nazi Germany in a way where, well, you have to let them talk. You have to let them run for office because tolerance. However, what they were saying was horrendous. And every time they were allowed to speak, they grew bigger. They got more people. They got more followers. And in the end, what did they do? The second they had the power to, they shut you up and they killed you. So no, you did not have to tolerate their hate speech. You did not have to tolerate it because they were invoking a paradox that sticks you in a place where even though you think you're tolerant, you're going to have to shut down some free speech. And that is why it's a paradox.
The growth of their free speech minimizes or eliminates others' free speech.
Yeah, because if you allow the intolerant to speak, they will gain power.
Yeah.
It's horrible. We shouldn't be put in that situation. I shouldn't be put in a situation where I actually have to say I don't want you to be able to say what you want to say. Like that's not an okay feeling for me. I'm not happy that there are people out there that I don't want giving their opinion. That's not a world I want to live in, but it turns out there are still Nazis.
Yeah. It's a necessary evil to protect people who would otherwise have their speech eliminated.
Yeah. More chat stuff here.
Let's hear it.
Let's see here. Sorry for missing that DM there. Depending on what day it was, sometimes I get one and I respond to those, and sometimes it'll be one of those days where there's like 200, and I get to the ones I can before I go to sleep, and the next day there's already new ones, and I don't want to not follow people because then I'm in an echo chamber. I follow random people like what probably happened with you because it helps me get out of that echo chamber. It helps me learn what more people are talking and learn exactly this perspective right here. For people who don't see the chat and maybe listening to this on a podcast or something, they responded to my last set of comments with allow the intolerant to speak, but follow it up viciously, accurately, and verbally shutting them down to leave it beyond a doubt that they are taking the wrong perspective. And I agree. Every time they are allowed to talk in public, every time here in Boston, Super Happy Fun America throws an event and Samson gets up on the mic, the left needs to be there and be louder than him so no one can hear him speak. They don't have to make him stop speaking into the microphone, just make it where no one can hear him. Then he gets his free speech. It's just, he's talking to nobody.
Yeah. What do you think personally, and internet free speech has long been a huge important value for you. What do you see yourself focusing on besides encouraging, activism and people getting involved and adding some good to the system? What are your focuses on politically? Like as you
my mind right now is really one, loving that people are coming back to go after QAnon and groups like that. I'm all in on any help I can give them. But really, when I think hard about where my energy is going to be spent beyond just running the show and things like that, it's going to be towards election reform. We need, in this order, the Electoral College to go the fuck away. We need national popular vote being counted. We need the Citizens United being overturned. We need a campaign finance reform where there is a limit and it is publicly funded. So instead of $14 billion, it's closer to someone sitting in Parliament in England, which is less than 10,000 spent on an election, right? We need same day voter registration, automatic voter registration. There are so many pieces to the election puzzle that need to be solved, and we need to start getting some of them done and done now. Like when you look at ranked choice voting, that's one that I was, you have no idea how much I was hoping for here. I was sitting at a dinner table with the person who started that actual nonprofit as he was trying to figure out how to file the paperwork. I was there. I've been listening to fairvote.org for anyone who's new to ranked choice voting. They've been in this fight since '93. And one of their founding board members was Chris Novoselic, the bassist from Nirvana. Just out of nowhere, right? Like, what's he doing? But he was in on ranked choice voting in the early 90s. This has been a fight that a lot of people have been having for a long time for anyone who's just now hearing about it. While that's sad to some respect that we haven't, won yet, but there's still a big fight to have. I think these latest elections are going to prove to people that it's necessary. And I think a lot more Democrats will come over when these runoffs for Senate happen because they're going to be done ranked choice voting. And if the Democrats take them both in the ranked choice way, that might convince some more Democrats that this is a pretty good idea. I'm hoping.
I mean, even outside of the benefits to getting more people involved, I think it just changes how we have conversations, right? Like if our political our political representatives, we really get a swath of them, and we feel like they actually represent our values and our political voice, and they're working with each other as opposed to like constantly shutting each other out. I think it changes how we view politics, how we think about it, how it how we interact with each other on these issues. Have you read or seen the political industry, the politics industry?
No, I haven't actually.
Okay.
New book or?
Yeah, it's a book, and then I've heard. Hold on.
I read books literally every single night, so this is now on my list, and I'm really bad at finding new ones. So great.
Michael Porter and Catherine Gell.
Perfect.
And Catherine Gell was a businesswoman who kind of started to critically assess politics and how it works specifically from like a business perspective, and see where the incentives were and how some of these things can change. Her big recommendations from the book were obviously an alternative voting system, getting rid of first past the post, and top 5 primaries, where you remove the primary process from the two-party system.
Yeah, primaries and caucuses have to go. I mean,
they close off and disenfranchise too many voters, and also give way too much power to extremes in a way that has been incredibly unproductive.
They also are specifically ways that the two-party duopoly holds on to control, because it's very hard to get things done in states if you aren't part of one of their caucuses or primaries as a third party. Third parties, I mean, Joe Jorgensen's got, what, like 1.2% of the vote or something? Like, third parties cannot get power in this country until we switch up the voting system.
Yeah. So, yeah, those are some options that I've seen going forward, and I'm glad that that's your number one issue. For me, you know, as I was looking at presidential candidates in the last election, if you're not talking about voting reform or fixing our democracy, everything else is a moot point, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. You know, I've been a Bernie supporter for both these last 2 rounds, and very upset at how the party itself, the Democrats, worked against him to make sure he didn't get the nom. And I do think, you know, he would have won, just period. All right. So, and it would have been called on the night of, not, you know, all this fun stuff. But, you know, that's neither here nor there at this point. We are where we are. So instead, let's talk about what the future looks like. And I think it looks like enough reform that we get a powerful third party. And I honestly think that powerful third party is going to be a progressive party. I think it's going to be a bunch of progressives who feel unwelcome by the Democrats, because the Democrats have been very clear that we are indeed unwelcome, and that we need to fall in line and give them our vote, even though they don't earn it. And I think enough of us are going to go off somewhere else if we can get some of these reforms through. Now, they know that too, which is why the reforms aren't going through easily.
Yeah. How do you see some of the actions tying directly into democracy reform? Because from my perspective, democracy reform is not sexy in a way where people want to stand in the streets about it, right? So like, we need some of those actions to play into it. Even, you know, the Yes on 2 ranked choice voting campaign in Massachusetts, people cared about it. It's an issue that I think we liked, but it still did not pass. And I don't know if any sort of direct action plays into that. Do you see there being a relationship on some of the other things that we can do, as, you know, other states I know over the next year, next 2 years, next 4 years are going to attempt voting reform. I know that, you know, Fair Vote and other organizations are working on it.
Well, I think there's an interesting domino effect here, where we need more people to realize that some of these progressive issues are actually important to them. And we also need them to have the freedom to be able to put time into this. And what we end up with is UBI, right? UBI is very important, which is Universal Basic Income. And a lot of other countries do this really specifically in order to free people's time up to focus on not only the work that they're going to do, it lets them choose the work they're going to do instead, but it also allows a lot more people to take part in politics. So I think you get interesting domino effects when you start adding in these progressive movements, such as UBI, Medicare for All. When you start getting these passed, you'll find a lot more people who see politics helped my life and I have some free time. Those people are going to be the ones that give us the numbers necessary to start changing things. And so we've got to get a couple early wins, but I think UBI and M4R aren't the Medicare for All there. I think they're not off the table. I think we find ways to get closer to those over the next few years, and when they happen, we start moving forward with all the bigger reforms.
As we show people that these institutions and systems can be used in a way that actually benefits your life.
Yeah. I mean, they've got to see clear benefits instead of clear, pain points. I mean, you come from a very marginalized community, and you understand that a lot of interactions, I'm sure, with even police on the street during any moment is negative. So especially here in Boston, like there's just all these negative interactions with the government, right? If we can get things like UBI going, that's a very positive interaction with the government. That'll change a lot of people's minds in terms of what they can accomplish in the system. I think in the end, I would be happier if the system was wholly replaced. Electoral college be damned, ranked choice systems, instant runoff systems, whatever. But we've got to convince people that they even need to take part first. And I think they're going to have to see some real tangible wins. And that's going to be Medicare for All and UBI. We get those through and we're going to have a lot more activists on our hands.
Awesome. Well, it is 9. I'm really looking forward to, the action that comes out of the Gregg Housh Show. And
thank you.
All of the positive things that you push for. I mean, it's been, again, like the Occupy Wall Street movement and bringing forth, some of the income inequalities and some of the systemic failures that we all felt but didn't know about directly. It really brought me into a political education and caring, like you said,
right,
in some ways that I think are invaluable. And I'm very excited to see like how you build on that, and I'm super glad to see that you're not done working in this and organizing, being the world's best middle manager in the political world.
I've had to fight off the burnout a little here and there, but I've fought it off, and let's hope this goes well, because I do have a lot of ideas of things we're going to do going forward. To everyone in the chat there, talking about Vermin Supreme, my good friend Vermin Supreme. I love Vermin, and I love the entirety of what he does. I enjoy it all. I do believe I know people in the house I live in, and possibly in other houses that I frequent, that all voted for him with the write-in. So, yes, he is great, and everyone deserves a free pony.
I had the honor of meeting him at the New Hampshire Democratic Convention last year, and I'm thoroughly impressed. I think people who miss the caricature of what he's doing and who he is, like, are cheated of a great experience. And
my favorite Vermin experience of all time is I'm in Boston, big protest. The cops have finally decided it's time to start the riot, so they've attacked someone who was doing nothing. And I'm around the corner walking towards this inflection point because I was at a different front line with cops because they're in like 6 different streets, right? And I'm walking towards it, and around the corner comes running, like at full speed, Vermin with this boot on his head and everything. And he sees me and a couple friends, and he dives behind us, ducks down, takes off the boot, takes off the sweater, pulls out of a bag on his back a different coat, puts it on, puts the hood up, and then stands there with us as a cop goes running by. And I'm like, that's Vermin. That's just... And my friends are standing there looking at this guy like, what the F? And I'm like, sup, Vermin? And he's like, hey, Greg. And it just like nothing had just happened. And that literally my favorite Vermin story. Just running around a corner. It's great. I love him.
Master of disguise.
Yep. So, yeah, I mean, I think we're 2 hours in. I think that's a show. Does the chat have anything they want to hear? Would they want to know? Anything before I close this one down? Anything I forgot to mention? I'm supposed to do all that follow and subscribe stuff at the end here, like all the other streamers, right?
Ring the bell, smash the like button.
Yeah, smash the like button.
Paying your attentions. He's got good stuff to share.
Well, this is the other thing. We're going to be running Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 7 to 9 Eastern. until people tell me that it has to be 8 to 10 or something because of like West Coast. I think 7 to 9 works. And it's going to then tomorrow be uploaded to YouTube and uploaded as a podcast. So every next day it should. They'll all be on gregghoush.com, so you can just go to my website. It's linked on the Twitch profile and all that fun stuff. So yeah, anyone who joined late, you'll get to watch the whole thing if you want. And of course, subscribe and follow and all that fun stuff over on YouTube. And that's the schedule. That's what we're doing, and we'll be back Monday. Thanks, everyone. And a big thanks and shout out to Gray here. He is in the tweet that I tweeted out, and you should all follow and see what he's up to.
Just a lot of basic income advocacy. So
there you go.
For allowing me to interview you. This has been educational and inspiring, and looking forward to seeing what's next.
All right, we're gonna do the right thing here, which is we hit the end button. And it starts doing that wonderful thing on the stream. And we can answer anything else from the chat there. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Yep, that's us. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for all the comments. Thanks for the questions. And thanks for especially anyone who disagreed and I got to actually hear these other points of view. I absolutely love that and need that. It's one of the main reasons I interact and follow so many people on Twitter. Is it really opens my eyes to new ways of looking at things. Just as a prime example, before we close off here, I had never really thought of working class as a signal from a racist newscaster for just white people. I just wasn't looking at that one right, and I work really hard as a 44-year-old trying to keep my inclusive language on point, but there's so much that I've said in my life before this was how it was done that no one was helping me with. Today I learned working class is indeed a way news people signal to white people. So instead call them labor or laborers. So that's the kind of thing I learned by all these interactions, and I just love it. So I hope you guys show up next time. I hope you have comments, questions, disagreements. They're great. Thanks.